Survivor's ready. Go!
Travis spoken.
Boston Rob and Amber are gonna do it.
This is a business trip, as I like to say.
You Brad Culpepper.
I'm tired of you and the fucking chicken.
You can call me the puppet master. They can be my little puppets.
It's not like you make me feel the devil here.
You get to milk your own milk, I guess.
We got enough rocks here, too. We could build a pretty decent shelter just using rocks.
I'm supposed to talk loud.
Direct from Hobart, it's time for the only Survivor podcast in Australia dedicated to Survivor, bringing you today's interviews, episodes, and opinions from the greatest reality show on the planet. It's Survivor Oz, and here's your host.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Survivor Oz, Australia's only Survivor podcast. We are back for another and final Oztopsy for the season. We are here talking about the finale of Survivor Kaoh, that memorable finale that everyone loved and didn't cause a riot amongst the Survivor fan base and didn't see random obscure pop stars showing up and taking time at the reunion and Drew Carey and people making fire and all that fun. This is a normal Oztopsy, well, as normal as it can be after Ben left like 10 weeks ago, but it's been a while. But joining in as me, Colin, welcome back. I think it's been like a month since we've actually done a proper one.
Yeah, and it's been about a whole week since I had a baby soil a diaper on the air, so we're going to go for more records today.
Yeah, breaking new grounds in Survivor Oz. First we got people to eat random apple recipes, and now we've got babies going to the toilet. So, fun times. So this is what happens when your leader goes away. It's chaos ensues. But yeah, we're just going to talk about the finale. We're not going to dive super in depth into the actual episode because it was a long one with random reward challenges when there didn't need to be random reward challenges and other annoying things, and pretty sure 3 challenges that were identical, maybe. Like, run out and get that puzzle piece and build that puzzle and then karate kick it. So, yeah, it was a very interesting finale. And, yeah, Meh-Shell is our latest winner. That's right. Meh-Shell. Before we get into that, maybe just give us your brief thoughts on the episode, Colin, because we're mainly going to be talking about just the major things of it, but the episode and reunion, just brief thoughts.
Oh, well, I'd give the finale as an episode maybe a 6.5, a 7. I'd give the reunion maybe about a 0.6 to a 0.7.
Wow, that's generous.
Yeah. I do like that when you could basically hear Noah biting his tongue when he said the word interesting, referring to this finale. It's so hard to talk about the finale without jumping into Michelle as a winner right away. But, I mean, you said it all about the challenges. I fast forward the challenges most of the time in a finale just because I don't have time to waste on rewards and everything. These ones, I could not notice any difference, and I'm guessing I didn't miss anything from skipping them.
No. How could they do a reward challenge in the finale? That I'm against those random, like, you're playing for an advantage, which is going to guarantee you a spot in the final 3. But this was just a reward for, like, more beef or whatever it was. They wanted another medevac.
They're just looking for the next oldest person to be medevac. What do we have?
The next oldest? It's probably going to be Aubrey.
Yeah, well, like what's she, like 28, 29 or something like that? We're going to have our first 28-year-old medevac for prostate problems. She's a girl now. They're throwing everything at you in the finale. There were a couple of things I liked. I think the twist, I guess you could call it the twist. I don't know if it really mattered in the end, but it made for good TV. I don't think it's something we need to see every season, but it made the finale stand out a little bit. It gave us an interesting tribal council where nobody was voted out. Some good things in here. We'll cover Michelle. I know Rossi right now is like, I was right, but I have some arguments to make even still on that. So this is mostly going to be about Michelle. I'm not going to make it a bash Michelle episode. I just have some opinions on how Michelle was handled as a character. You're going to.
Maybe. We'll see how this episode goes. One thing we should say is, if you flash back a few weeks ago, and if you didn't have a baby and have time to edit, you would put a sound clip flashback, but I'm not expecting that of you. I said, Colin, you're either going to be very wrong on being so staunch on Aubrey not winning, or you're going to be very right, and everyone else is going to be very wrong. So, congratulations at least on that part, even though if it was a blindside.
Well, I don't know if I wanted to be right in terms of her losing to Michelle, but I'll take it for what it's worth.
Yeah, you didn't predict that. No one predicted that.
I will also say I probably spent every week after that saying that we reached the point weeks ago where no matter who won this season, it was going to be one of the weirdest seasons ever, and I think I stand by that.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. But yeah, Aubrey. All right, we'll get into Aubrey, but I guess we were right on that part. But one part we were wrong on, the Michelle movers. They were definitely right. A lot of people predicted it, and I was actually talking to Ozlet Nick the other day after the finale because he was kind of similar rage and needed an outlet to rage onto. And we discussed the possibility of, and I'm not calling anyone here liars, it's just a possibility. I haven't delved into it yet. But was there spoilers for this season? Because a lot of people were saying in like week 4, Michelle is the winner, Michelle is the winner.
That was the first thing I thought of, was that there were definitely spoilers out there. I will say at the same time, though, there was that ridiculous prediction that people gave as to their reasoning why Michelle was the winner, which was, you mentioned it many times, just because she had all these random confessionals that didn't seem to be connected to anything else. And I think as a fan of Survivor, you get used to, even if you don't analyze the edit, you get used to how characters are presented. I don't think a winner had ever been presented in that way, but looking back on it now, I mean, some of the opinions I'm going to have about Michelle as a winner, it matches up with a few other people in the past, where maybe not necessarily they played a bad game, but that they didn't play a game that was open to the cameras. So I honestly believe that Michelle's not a bad winner. The show didn't maybe mishandle her, but she just wasn't a person who was in front of the cameras and playing obviously enough. So their hands were tied, and all they could do was give those random confessionals. So yes, everybody was right. Those random confessionals did add up to a winner. Not that it should. That doesn't mean this is representative of a good winner. It's just that ended up being right in this case.
Yeah, that says something when random confessionals is all you've got to work with. Look at all these random confessionals of her talking about beef. That means she's the winner. That's all we've got to show of her. Yeah, I'm not calling anyone saying that anyone was spoiled and they were saying that. I'm just putting the thought out there because I also did see a Reddit thread before the season even started saying who will be the Medivacs this season. And pretty much every post randomly had Caleb on it, which made zero sense to me. Why would you randomly have Caleb? That doesn't make any sense. And then flash to episode 4 and Caleb gets Medivac. How dare you, Peter, for not helping him
You're a
during
doctor.
that moment.
Strip him of his medical
doctor,
license.
How horrible of you. So, yeah, I'm just putting the possibility out there, not calling anyone a liar.
I'm calling you all liars, okay? You people were spoiled.
You all suck.
And you tried to spoil it for the rest of us.
Let's talk about... There's just so much... Where do you start? There's so much to say, but let's talk about, and you already kind of touched on it, regardless of her game, is Michelle a satisfying winner as a character?
No, I think that's where the issue a lot of fans are having.
Moving on!
Yeah. Well, let's look at it here. I mean... Just to remind ourselves of the challenges we didn't watch and everything like that, we often open Wikipedia pages on here, and there is the critical reception already listed on the season here on Wikipedia, where it says, the season was met with mixed to positive receptions by critics and fans, many applauding the overall season, but some calling the finale lackluster. Many were critical of Fitzgerald as the winner, stating the runner-up Aubrey was more deserving. I don't think that's the issue here. It's not that Aubrey was more deserving. I said weeks ago Aubrey cannot win the game, and I stand by. If she had been against Sydney, she stands no chance. If she had been against just tie, maybe she wins. But this is an issue of Michelle as a character was never developed properly. We don't need a winner's edit every time. I've been applauding this season for the last couple months for the fact that it's not presenting the typical characters. Nobody was being set up as your typical winner. But maybe, again, their hands were tied and there just wasn't any real footage to use of Michelle, or maybe they just did a bad job. I refuse to believe that after this many years, they just will pull a Jenna Maraska or a Danny Boatwright, just at random and say, well, we don't like Michelle as a winner, so we won't give her the airtime. I just don't think there was anything out there for them to use.
Yeah, it's kind of funny with the whole winners edit thing, because I would agree with you, and I've always said in the last 3 or 4 weeks as the numbers dwindled and more, I always had Michelle as kind of a dark horse, but she was never up there for me. And that's just me being a dumb bum, because a lot of people did predict this. But it's not a traditional winner's edit, even if people did predict it. So it's really fascinating that people were so outraged and people were so blindsided, yet so many people saw it coming.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I've been calling her Mare-Shell long before the finale. She's nothing to me as a character, and I always have to differentiate this because people jump on and say, am I attacking these people or something? These are people on a TV show that we don't know in real life that we see 40 minutes a week of. She could be completely different in real life, but on the show, there was nothing that interested me about her. I didn't find anything she said fascinating. I found her annoying at times. I found her confessionals really she was shouting almost a lot of the time. Me and Ty, we're in an alliance now, and it was just really bland. And she actually has the highest confessional count of any female winner, but what people don't realize is 25 of them came from the last 2 episodes or something, when there was no one left in the game and someone got medevaced for eating too much beef and there was nothing else to show in it. But what is there interesting about Michelle? And a lot of the thing about the winners is we get to know them a bit as a person, as much as you can in the confines of this show. There's only 12, 13 episodes. But what do we know about Michelle other than that she's a bartender and that she shouts every now and then? What is there about Michelle? And she did have a bit of a loyal fan base, but I'm sorry, that's just her and a bunch of characters. This is kind of being championed as one of the best casts ever. I'm a Kaoh fan. I did not love this cast, and Michelle, if I had to rank from 18 to first of interesting characters or who I like the best to the worst, regardless of their gameplay, Michelle would be 16, 17, 18, maybe 15, no higher than that.
Yeah, I agree. And again, it's not knocking her. I actually found that, especially in the finale, she was very well spoken. I can see how, based just on a tribal council, she could win, but we've also gotten so used to the final tribal council not really meaning anything. We've had so many people come on this show and say, yeah, the juries make up their mind before you go into it. So if anybody's going to look at it and say, well, Michelle won everybody over in the final tribal council, I don't think that's the case. I honestly don't know what it is. It's such a confusing season. I think part of that does have to do with Aubrey, and I really grew to like Aubrey and even appreciate her game. But let's be honest, Aubrey is not a good speaker. And Ty is maybe the worst speaker in the history of Survivor. If she won simply because she's well-spoken, then I think that's something that could be explained. But we didn't get any hint of that in any episodes prior to this. I mean, we never heard from her. And maybe she's going to come forward one day and say, well, yeah, I intentionally played under the radar and everything. Well, that's fine, but you do have to look at it as a TV show too. And this, I think you said it and I'll say it again. We're not necessarily knocking Michelle's win. We're knocking how this season played out from the point of view of a fan. Because even though it is reality TV, you're still supposed to be entertained the same as you would be entertained by any other TV show out there. And if this is the way another TV show ends, if this is how a season of 24 ends or anything else, where just the most meaningless character ends up being the hero, well, fans of that show are going to say, well, the scripting was bad. You can't blame anybody for this. It's just the way the season worked out.
And I think that's one of the major flaws, is you kind of touched at the beginning of your comments there, is maybe people saw this coming a mile away, but that's reading the little clues of here's her random confessional talking about beef. That's the random confessional talking about beef could tell you the clues for her to becoming the winner, but it doesn't tell you the story of how she won the game.
Yeah.
And that is one of the biggest flaws with that, and I think why a lot of people are frustrated, regardless of the Aubrey thing, which we'll get to, is that they didn't tell her story in terms of the jury. And I haven't watched it, I forgot to, I've been busy. There's like the jury speaks behind the scenes things, which would be interesting to watch. But that's not even a part of the show. Most viewers don't watch those online things. In Australia, you have to watch a freaking bypass filter thing just to even get to them because of stupid CBS. I'm not sure if it's the same in Canada, but they didn't tell the story of how Michelle won.
Yeah, and again, maybe their hands were tied and they just didn't have the footage to tell her story properly. But I think any fans out there saying, well, they did tell it properly, I mean, the show does know best. And the honest truth is, a lot of people are still to this day critical of Jeff Probst and saying, well, the reason Probst wasn't talking up the season is because a woman won. Probst did a pretty good job of talking up Michelle in that finale for the brief amount of time he spent on her.
Talking up Michelle, not talking to Michelle.
Yeah, exactly. But it is interesting. And again, Michelle is very well spoken. And I think in the final tribal council, she explained why she could win better than Aubrey or Ty. Again, Aubrey and Ty are terrible public speakers. But the fact is, when this show ended and Michelle was speaking at the beginning of the finale and she's explaining her win, Probst even cut in there to say, well, you also did this and you also did this. Even Jeff Probst felt like we have to explain this a little bit more because there's just nothing there in the show to explain it. Also, let's touch on this a little bit. Even the supporters of Michelle have been wrong. I remember, I think it was, I don't want to quote him, but, well, I'll quote him anyways. And Rossi said this. Of course, nobody's there to go back and play the clip. But whether Rossi said it, I know I heard a lot of people say this. They're like, well, Michelle at least has Julia's vote, and she has Nick's vote. Okay, I've even seen comments, people saying, oh, well, she had Julia's vote. Julia was more critical of Michelle in the final tribal council than anybody. And basically when she voted for her, she said, I'm voting for you because I told you I would. It was just her keeping her word. She wasn't supporting Michelle. Nick is one of two people who didn't vote for her, and this is the person that Michelle said, this was my biggest ally in the game. And if it was Rossi or somebody else in the last couple of weeks that was saying, Michelle can win because she has Nick's vote for sure. She didn't even have Nick's vote. Her allies didn't vote for her, and they promoted this final episode. We talked about this last week. The final episode was being promoted as Michelle, who hasn't had a solid ally the entire game. Well, the closest thing she had to solid allies were the ones who didn't want to vote for her. So,
and the ones she voted out.
Yeah, exactly. Now, again, whoever wins, wins. And I don't really believe that you can have a season where the best player doesn't win, because the best player has to know how to play that jury. For whatever reason, this was just a really unusual season where you had really odd people make the finals and a jury that just probably didn't know who to vote for. I think Neil's comments, we'll probably touch on that a little bit, but Neil's comments probably spoke a lot about how people felt about Michelle. It's just they felt stronger about not wanting Aubrey or Ty to win.
I will actually come back to the best player is the one who wins, because that's definitely something I want to bring up and we'll create a debate about, but maybe not quite yet. I do have to say that I'm glad we didn't record the Oztopsy at normal time, and I'm glad I've had time to digest some things, because I'm just looking back at my Twitter account now, and the moment that she won, I say, I honestly think Michelle might be 31 in my winner rankings. #survive. And right before that was, I want to win, Ty. I think they'll win, Aubrey. Devastated if they win, Michelle. And even up to the vote in the final tribal council, I said, seems like it's going to be a close vote, but I'm still going to say Aubrey has it. Oh, and I also said in all capital letters, enough with the challenges! 3 exclamations. You know that I hate challenges.
But before we even move on, let's just talk about, was it nice to have the mirror and the scale call back to Borneo there?
Oh, yeah. That was the best part about the reunion. The mirror was back. What did I say? I've said... Alright, this one is... Maybe I regret it, but I had 8 favourites and 1 retweet. I'm not sure if I stand by it. I've been very vocal in saying I'm not an Aubrey fan, but I will unapologetically say I think this is the one season the jury got it wrong. We'll come back to that. That was the heat of the moment. That has left a sour taste in a season that already had a meh post-merge that didn't live up to the fantastic pre-merge, which we'll get to as well, because... Maybe I don't regret saying that one. And this is a good lead into Michelle's actual game, which we'll talk about now. I say, Michelle, this had 18 favourites and 7 retweets, which for me is a lot. I don't have too many followers. That's probably like the most of any tweet I've ever said. I say, Michelle's biggest move is not going to Tribal Council for 22 days, and then being such a non-factor that no one cared to vote her out.
That's pretty fair. I mean, that's something that a lot of people haven't brought up. People are critical of Tom for winning Palau because, like, well, he didn't have to play the game for the first half. Well, but he had to play really hard for the second half. Michelle didn't have to play for the first half. What is it? I believe it's the longest. Was it her that was the longest anybody had ever gone without going to Tribal?
Yep, because of the Neil Medivac.
Yeah, so this is the longest anybody had to go without playing the game. And then we all knew when the merge hit that people like Michelle and Joe were guaranteed to make it far. So it's not critical of her win. She found a way to make it to the end. She was under fire for a few weeks there. But honestly, do you judge the best player as the person who played the best game at the end? Like, I'm not going to quote it or anything, but there were comments on an article that already went up on the site, and somebody made the comment saying Michelle did what she had to do to win the game, and they just quoted things that happened in the last 2 episodes. And this was the same argument for Jenna Maraska. They're like, she was a challenge beast, way more than Aubrey or Ty. It's like, well, no, I would love to see the statistics on this, because I'm pretty sure that Aubrey and Ty dominated for the first half of this merge portion of the game. And if you were to add up who won the most challenges, I don't know, would it be Michelle?
Well, Probe said she won 4, and yeah, because this season was very spread out on like 1 in terms of challenge wins. So yeah, it probably would be Michelle towards the end there.
I want to see if we can look it up here. Rewards. Okay,
I don't notice the rewards, that's why I don't know.
Ty won a reward and immunity. Then he won a reward. Then he won another reward. He won another.
Oh.
Yeah, so, and then look at Aubrey here. Aubrey won right at the merge. She won nothing. Maybe Aubrey didn't do as good as I thought. But yeah, overall, Ty was the challenge performer in this season. And Michelle won 2 immunities, is it? Yeah, 2 immunities.
Yeah.
And
what's the end?
And again, I'm not knocking these people who come out there and win lots of immunities at the end, but people always seem to be overly impressed when somebody can win these back-to-back immunities. Like Fabio won all these immunities at the end. Kelly Wigglesworth won all these immunities. Jenna Maraska won all these immunities. Yeah, but you're competing against 3 people. I mean, it's a lot different than when you're competing against 8 or 9 other people.
And one of them is Joe.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, she didn't win that immunity, but my point still sticks.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you're just going to base it on, well, she won a bunch of challenges. First of all, she didn't win as many challenges as Ty did overall. Ty is still the biggest challenge performer this season. What Michelle really had going for her is that she was, I don't know if she was likable, because we do have to look at how her allies viewed her. Nick didn't want her to win, and Julia didn't seem to like her all that much. She didn't rub people the wrong way. She didn't make enemies. Part of that, as I was saying in the recap with Rossi last week, came down to the fact that she wasn't even part of several of these votes. So you can't make the same enemies. And, you know, if that's somebody's strategy, that's one thing. But it really wasn't Michelle's strategy. She was upset when she wasn't part of these votes in these blind sides. So is she the best winner? you were saying, does the person who win, is that automatically the best winner? I think yes and no. I think in this case, it makes her the best winner of the final 3, but it does not make her the best winner of everybody who made the merge. And I think Sydney makes the finals. People can say whatever they want about, Jason was angry and stuff like that. I think Sydney wins this hands down against anybody of those final 3.
I'll come back to that because it's definitely something I want, and I would probably agree with you on Sydney, which definitely someone we do have to at least touch on because
Probst didn't.
But he talked to her mum though.
Yeah, her mom got more screen time in the reunion than she did.
That was ridiculous. Although in Probe's credit, he did say he actually addressed it on Twitter, saying that that was his fault. His fault and Sia's fault, which we'll get to. I've got a lot of things to say about that. But I'm just thinking now is you could kind of make a case, and this is just looking at the worst of Michelle. She did do good things, but you could almost take like the criticisms from other winners and apply it to her entire game. Like you said, people criticise Tom Westman for never having to play until the second half. Well, that applies to Michelle. People criticise Mike because he had to win immunities at the end to get there. That applies to Michelle. People criticise Natalie because she got into a solid alliance and just floated through the merge. That applies to Michelle. So you can almost you could probably do the same thing and look at the positives of different winners and apply it to her. But it's almost like you could put together her game like that. But and again, I keep saying this, we'll get to the best player versus the person who wins. But I just wonder, did Michelle win, or did Michelle... Oh, I didn't phrase that right.
Did Aubrey and Ty lose?
Yeah, did Aubrey and Ty lose, or did Michelle win? And the notion of there's so much to talk about. This has been bottling up for I'm all over the place. But the notion of a bitter jury always fascinates me and always angers angry online Survivor fans. I just wonder... Jason and Scott just really rubbed me the wrong way. You watch the Ponderosa and you watch their actions at the jury, and I wonder if they were always going to not vote for the person who bested them the most, no matter what. And to me, that would be the definition of a bitter jury. Some people don't think a bitter jury exists, but if someone is only going to vote for the person who didn't screw them over the most, while other people... it's such a difficult thing, because then people say, well... that's their values in the game, blah, 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 blah.
But then that encourages every single season a person to not make any enemies.
Yeah.
So we're going to... If this is the way Survivor is played best, the show's not going to be on the air very long. Because if every season ends up this way, it's just like when you look at, how Richard Hatch changed the game. So then everybody started playing like Richard Hatch. If... everybody starts playing like Michelle, there is no season because nobody's going to want to make enemies. Nobody's going to make any decisions. They're never going to want to be part of Blindsides.
Yeah, it's completely counterintuitive to what Jeff Probst hypes up the players to do. Big moves, blindsides, all that jazz.
There is
Which
one more...
Survivor can be good without big moves.
Yeah. I mean, it can be really good. Look at the first half of this season. I would rank the pre-merge stuff of this season against the best pre-merge seasons out there. And there really wasn't that much going on. It was back to, interesting characters, some good survival elements. There is one more thing I wanted to add on Michelle. And again, nobody should take this as me knocking Michelle. I wouldn't rank Michelle at the bottom of my winners. That's Fabio. That's Amber. That's not Michelle. Michelle did well against the people she was in the final tribal council with. And I can give her credit for that. But Michelle, her big move in the game never worked out. Her trying to get on Ty's side and everything like that. And if you're going to look at, the final, 4 where she forced the tie, she was asked about this. She said, I had no idea what was going to happen. So again, the most critical vote where she had the most power, just like earlier on where she wasn't part of the votes and was upset about it, she's saying, I don't even know if it's necessarily true. She may have wanted to force that tie, but in her words, I didn't know that was going to happen. Well, she's not defending her moves in the game. Again, all you're getting from Michelle is, yes, she was a good social player. Maybe not even a great social player, just a good social player.
Well, you could also argue they built the narrative around the Julia vote out as one of her big moves, but you could almost argue people say Sierra voting out her mum isn't a big move because it was going to happen anyway. I can't remember the exact specifics of the Julia vote, but I'm pretty sure it was happening no matter what. And it wasn't like Michelle came up with this big thing of, let's vote out Julia.
Yeah.
I'd have to go back and watch the episode, but...
Wasn't the previous episode where they were saying, let's get rid of Julia? I mean, the second that she started buddying up to Scott and Jason, it was immediately, well, we need to get rid of Julia.
Yeah. A few things I want to address, and you keep saying you're not knocking Michelle's game. I am a little bit knocking Michelle's game. I think we're allowed to say that Michelle wasn't a brilliant player, in terms of the other winners at least.
But in all fairness, we're also saying Aubrey and Ty weren't brilliant players either.
Yeah, I'm interested when we get to them, because I don't really have too many positives. I will have some positives for both of them, but really, I think in terms of characters, there was 2 out of 3 good characters in this finale, final 3. But in terms of players, I keep saying, and people get angry at me when I say this, and people think I don't like the season when I say this, Kaoh had some really lousy players in it, and that doesn't mean it's a bad season. I don't know if you remember, but we have our little Ozlets Facebook group, and I put this post up that people were playing bad, and everyone getting on me thinking I hate the season and all this stuff. It doesn't mean I hate it, I just don't think the quality of players were good this season. It was more about characters for me this season. Tangent. Where was it? A few things I want to address. I don't know what point I'm on. I'm going a million miles an hour here. But one, we brought it up, and I've seen people saying, stop using she didn't have to go to tribal council for 22 days as a bad thing about a game. I think it is a bad thing about a game. Again, it's just my opinion. We're all entitled to our own opinion. And the argument is the physical aspect is an important aspect, and that's a plus to her game. Which makes sense, except for the fact that we had a whole scene dedicated to the fact that she screwed up a reward challenge and that she was no help in the challenges. You cannot argue that she contributed to her not going to 22 days. That was complete blind luck, and sometimes luck is a big factor. That's not the push against her, because there's some of the very best winners have gotten very lucky in Survivor, that's for sure. Sandra has gotten lucky. A lot of people have gotten lucky. But she did not contribute to that. And then the other thing is, stop knocking her for winning challenges at the end. Because challenges are an important thing. I feel like in the Survivor fan base, there's a lot of hypocrites. I'm just going to say it. I would probably be among those hypocrites. You could find comments that I've said that are hypocritical. I'm not excused of this. But they say, like, oh, Sandra is amazing because she didn't have to win challenges. Stop knocking winners who won challenges. It's just... Challenges, one thing I've hated about Redemption Island is challenges are a part of Survivor, but I've never viewed them ever as crucial parts of Survivor, ever. People throw challenges sometimes. Like, these are things that you can use to your advantage, just like hidden immunity idols, but then often they're not crucial parts of winning, although apparently you can get jury votes because you won a lot of challenges. So I don't think they're pluses for her game. If anything, they're negatives for her game. Alright, let's just move on. There's so much I could say about Michelle. I want to get your opinion on this. Basically, the narrative around Michelle and her win by everyone online, in the show, everything, was the social game. And I want to know what the hell the social game is. Because... is being likable the social game? Because I'm pretty sure 90% of Survivor contestants are liked amongst the rest of the cast. There's only the few Abby Marias and all that out there, and the Wheels and stuff like that. But to me, the social game, man, I think it was on Survivor Oz, it may have been on something else. Vesepia came on and she talked about how she had her luxury item was a journal and a pen. And every time that she learned a new piece of information about a contestant, about their family life or whatever, she would write it in the back of her notebook. She would have pages for each of the contestants so that it would come in handy when it ever came to the Fallen Comrades challenge or the Final Tribal Council, because back in the old days, a lot of the Final Tribal Council, like, you've got, was it like Penny or something asking Brian Hiding how many sisters she has or whatever it is. To me, that is the social game, and I'm just confused as, are we giving Michelle this credit for this masterful social game when her social game was just not getting into fights?
Well, I would give her credit for playing a decent social game, because I think not making enemies is part of it. But as I said earlier, if you're simply not part of any of the votes, you don't have the opportunity. If she was able to make every move she wanted to make, she would have made enemies too. I don't know if it was intentional on her part to be the most likable person in this Final Four. She didn't pick the Final Four. If she had picked the Final Four, I doubt it would have been, let me sit next to Sydney, Aubrey, and Ty. On top of that, being likable is one part of the social game, just like winning challenges is one part of winning Survivor. The second part of that is you have to be able to play people and really have people siding with you. And I don't think Michelle wins this if she's next to a lot of other people in this season. And the evidence of that is that she didn't have any strong allies. And nobody really wanted to keep her around. And it wasn't even like this wasn't a thing like Alicia where they were outright saying, we can't wait to get rid of you. They would just openly say, you know what, you're not part of any of our plans. Sorry, you're going to be the next one to go. If you're playing a masterful social game like people are claiming, people won't want to get rid of you. Mike is...
And you're probably in with everyone as well.
Yeah, exactly. Mike is a good example last season of somebody whose social game might have actually been better than what we saw on TV, because everybody voted for him in the end, but everybody was targeting him with good reason. Whenever we heard people saying, let's target Michelle, it's just, well, she doesn't have enemies. Well, she didn't have enemies because she wasn't part of any of the votes. She wasn't the one blindsiding people, and that wasn't her choice. What the show told us, and what Michelle herself repeatedly said, is, I never had a solid ally. The only time she said she had a solid ally was Nick, and he didn't vote for her. So it's not a masterful social game. It's just the best social game against two people who kind of played terrible social games.
Yeah, well, that links back to the whole question of, did Michelle win or did Aubrey and Ty lose? Like, did she have this masterful social game?
Well,
or is it just a fact of the lesser of the evil?
Again, this is where it's hard to rate her, because kind of like Fabio, and I'm not saying she's as bad as Fabio. I'm not even saying Fabio's bad. I don't think any winner is bad, but Fabio had no say in how the game was going. He didn't pick who he was sitting next to in the end. He won a couple of challenges, and people want to talk about how there's luck in Survivor. I think there's more luck in challenges than there is in anything else. You don't know what the challenge is going to be. You don't know if it's going to play to your strengths. You don't know how the other person is going to perform. You don't even know whether you're going to be strong enough that day. You may prepare for a mental challenge, and you didn't bother to actually, give yourself any energy through rest or eating. It is mostly luck, I believe, with challenges. I don't think I could ever say just somebody lost a season. Maybe Sash lost a season to Fabio. That's a different case. Chase and Sash lost to Fabio. But if Michelle wasn't really part of anything, it's hard to say, because, again, I don't think necessarily that Aubrey and Ty... Ty played a terrible game. This is what I was saying. The season is a mess, and I love it for being a mess. It's a fun season. It's like Gabon for me, where it's just nothing makes sense, and nobody who was going to win Gabon was going to make sense to the audience, and nobody who was going to win this season was going to make sense. So, I mean, we could talk in circles for days on this.
I think you could almost summarize Michelle by saying that Michelle didn't really make many mistakes.
She didn't have the opportunity to either.
Yes, but Michelle didn't really make any mistakes, but she didn't really participate in much either, I guess you could put it. Is that a good summary of Michelle's game?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if you're like Natalie winning, either Natalie, you could take your pick. They made sure to stay on the right side of the right people. Michelle wasn't even trying to stay on the right side of the right people necessarily throughout this game.
She wanted to go to the finals with Sydney.
Yeah, exactly. And that would have been a terrible mistake. If Michelle is against Sydney at the end, I don't think there's any chance. Well, I'd like to get your opinion on that now if you want to move on to Sydney. But do you think Sydney wins this vote despite two guys on the jury who might have been bitter? That's 2 votes.
I'm not sure I'm as confident as you are about it, but I do think if Sydney's there, you saw Scott and Jason acting like that, and I don't know if you watched the Ponderosa, but they were similar in that. Yeah. They didn't even talk to her, and Julia was in there with them. So that's 3 votes gone already. And if you still say that Neil's off the jury, I do think Debbie would have voted for Sydney. And Joe votes for Aubrey, but if it's Sydney, Ty, and Michelle, then I think she's got Joe in there as well. Aubrey votes for Sydney. Nick, complete wild card. So I think it's close, but I think people a lot have ruled out Sydney on the fan base purely based on Scott and Jason's actions. I do think Sydney had a good chance.
Well, and also, another thing you have to look at is if Michelle is going to be given credit for, I think, the one thing she did really well, which was being well-spoken and playing the jury a little bit, playing a lot better than Aubrey and Ty did. If this jury made up their minds and picked Michelle because she performed best at Tribal Council, and she did perform great at Tribal Council, if that's what decided it for this jury, Sydney does the same thing. Sydney is probably just as well-spoken and just as good at debating and arguing her case as Michelle is, maybe better than anybody on this season. So if there was somebody else like Michelle who was going to sway jury's votes, it would have been Sydney. It definitely wouldn't have been Ty, and it definitely wouldn't have been Aubrey.
Yeah, Sydney's put...
Sydney's perfect, let's just say it.
I wasn't going to say perfect, but we'll go with perfect. Yeah, I was very sad when she was voted out 4th, because going to this, I wasn't really a fan of either of these 4 characters. I wouldn't say I wasn't not a fan, but I wasn't really feeling it. But Sydney was definitely the one rooting for her to make it to the end, and of course that doesn't happen. We'll talk about Aubrey and Ty, but let's just put a dick stamper onto Michelle's game. That's a 007 reference.
Yeah.
But that's not saying that someone was a dick or anything like that. And you keep saying you're not knocking it. I'm saying I think we don't have to tippy-toe. I am knocking Michelle's game a bit, but that doesn't mean I think she's an awful player or an awful winner. Michelle, she didn't really make mistakes, as I said before. She didn't really make anything, but she did what she needed to do to win, and she had some luck, but so have some of the very good winners had luck too. But just to put the stamper onto it, where would you roughly say Michelle would rank amongst your winners? And some people say, we don't believe in ranking winners. I say, screw you, it's fun. I don't care about you not caring. We're going to do it because I'm hosting. So roughly, where would you rank Michelle amongst your winners?
Well, we'll also say, if anybody wants to criticize us for this, Ben makes us do this once a year for the Oscars.
It's compulsory.
Yeah. I think, again, I think Fabio and Amber are the 2 winners where they just don't make sense to me. If there's 2 that I'm going to criticize, it's going to be them. It's tough because in the past, I even said a couple weeks ago that I've compared this to Gabon already, that at the time Gabon aired, I loved Bob as a winner because I think they found a way to tell his story. So there's really 2 ways to rank it. Is she the most satisfying winner ever? I'd rank her pretty low. But
31st.
Not 31st. Higher than Fabio, higher than Amber at least. But outside of that, if I'm ranking just based on the game, it would be a little bit higher. Not that high, maybe 25, because I think the thing that's working for her also works against her. What works for her is that she performed the best against the people she was up against at the end. But the people she was up against at the end really had a lot of flaws in their game. Everybody wants to say, "Oh, Aubrey played the best game." I was saying, well, every single week back when you wanted to do the flashback of me saying Aubrey has no chance of winning, all the way up until last week where I said Aubrey has the best chance of winning, but I could still see just as many arguments to make that Aubrey should lose the game. So the thing that works for her, being up against people that she could beat in the end, also works against her because she didn't choose who she was up against in the end, really. All the way down to let's push it to a tie. She really had no say in it. So maybe, if she's lucky, maybe 25, and that's not terrible. It's higher than some winners that got really good edits, but I don't see her on either side being a great winner.
Yeah, I go back to my tweet about, I honestly think Michelle might be 31st. I don't know if I honestly think that.
Please tell me Fabio is going to be lower than her.
Well, if we're talking about satisfying, I would say Fabio is much higher because
of the people he's up against in the end.
Well, that was, and I'm not going to get into this because we've got other stuff to talk about, and this would be a debate that would go on for half an hour. But when I was talking to Nick, we talked about, well, do they have trouble with displaying a woman social game as a win compared to a man? And Fabio is a case where I do think they did a good job of building a narrative around a social game with the likable Fabio. But anyway, he was more satisfying, I think, just because he was a fun character and he peed in a pool. Which, if Michelle did that, she might be a lot higher for me.
Michelle, if you come back for an All-Stars or a Heroes vs. Villains or an All-Winners against whatever, you need to start peeing more. That's what we need more of in Survivor.
That would make it much more satisfying. But I think, 25, 26 is pretty good. I'm not saying she is the worst, but there's these, defense posts out. Why Michelle is a top 5 winner? No.
I do have an extra question kind of in line with that, because usually where there's a winner where I'm not necessarily upset but kind of disappointed by, even in terms of Michelle where I'm disappointed just because the character wasn't somebody that you really root for to win, usually I find myself more negative on the season because of that. Do you find that her win affects how you like this season overall?
That's a good question, and was something I was going to get into later, but we may as well get this out of the way before we jump into Aubrey and Ty. But it's tough because I always say that it's more about the journey than the destination in Survivor. I don't watch for the winner. I watch for the week to week of what's happening and what's going on and the progress in the story. But at the same time, I have to say, if the winner isn't satisfying, then it does sour it a little bit for me. I'm not going to lie. I'm not saying that it lowers it 15 spots or something like that. But then it's kind of interesting because I was not a Mike fan at all. And I didn't feel completely unsatisfied when he won. Mm-hmm. I was rooting for Carolyn to win, and I still would have loved a Carolyn win. But when he won, I was just, yeah, that's the story. We saw it coming, but it happened, which is a good thing about the season, is we didn't see this coming. But I have to say it does sour it a little bit for me. And I've got more to say, but I would also say to you, I would ask the same question, but I would also say, and this is what I'm going to talk about too, is what were your overall thoughts? We're only a week out of Kaoh Rong in the end, because I've definitely got some contrasting opinions to a lot of people. But does it change for you? And what did you think of Kaoh Rong in the end?
I find this is one of the few seasons where the win doesn't affect how I like the season. I think that has a lot to do with the fact that outside of Sydney and maybe Debbie, I couldn't find anybody that I really would have been happy with as a winner overall. But that's kind of just the way this season was presented, and I've been talking a lot for weeks now about how I like that we're seeing a season where there's just as many negatives about these characters that we're seeing as we are seeing with the positives. And Aubrey's a perfect example of that. I've said it so many times that I could make just as strong of an argument for why she should lose as why she should win. And it's one of those weird seasons, and overall it was fun. And if people want to talk about a bitter jury, I mean, I don't think this is even close to a bitter jury. I think that this is a group of people who just appreciated the game for what it was and didn't take it too seriously. You know, Scott and Jason, maybe at times, but at the same time in the Tribal Council, when it was looking like one of them would be pulled, they were enjoying that. And I think that's what I appreciate about this season, is the cast overall wasn't taking it so seriously. Neil, if anybody should be upset, the guy who did nothing the entire season and never went to Tribal and got medevaced with an idol in his pocket, when he was booted, which we'll talk about the twist, I'm guessing still, he was enjoying it. He wore it like a badge of honor. You know, you could have a controversial twist and the cast doesn't cry about it. That makes a season. That's the difference between something like this and All-Stars. All-Stars, where you had really good players and you had tons of drama, maybe more than this season had, but everybody was crying about it at the end. I think the cast really helps make this a more satisfying season, despite the fact that I don't think it's the greatest cast I've ever seen. There's just something about the season I liked, and outside of a few episodes after the merge, mostly when people like Debbie were going, I think this season, it's going to rank at least in my top half once we're done.
Yeah, I'd just say, here's me being negative again. I don't think I loved it as much as a lot of people did. Most people are saying this is the top 10, top 5 season. To me, it didn't add anything to the Survivor, the canon of Survivor. It was just another entry that was solid. I liked it. I was never really bored from it, except for the Joe boot, which I might say is easily in the top 10 worst episodes of Survivor of all time. Except for the fact that someone got medevaced for eating too much beef, which is still amazing.
It's funny, people. Come on.
Rossi. But, yeah, I don't know. The cast, they were fun, but at the same time, I was just not a fan of characters like Michelle, Julia, Nick, Neil, Joe, even though it was hilarious when he got medevaced for eating too much beef. Scott and Jason were really fun characters, but sometimes just want to rip my hair out. And then you look back and, like, yeah, Darnell, he was fun at the time, but looking back, he's not like a Zayn Knight who stands out as a great first boot or a chicken or something like that. Jenny was fun at the time, but looking back, it's Jenny. I think Alicia's kind of lost a lot of her fan base over time. Liz doesn't really stand out as someone particularly memorable. Anna. I'm not going to say Peter because he's still my favourite of the season. Hashtag no apologies. I love Dr. Peter. So to me, I wasn't loving the cast, and I didn't really have anyone to root for once Debbie was voted out. And to me, I'm just going to say fantastic pre-merge. I agree with you. It's up there as one of the best, and the pre-merge is what's going to push it to my... I'm probably going to rank this when I have to, probably 15th, 16th. It's high up still for me. But the post-merge, there was a lot of meh episodes where it's, alright, Julia's gone. Alright, Joe's getting medevaced. Alright, Neil's getting medevaced. I don't know. I didn't love it as much as a lot of people, but it was still a solid season that I enjoyed.
Did you enjoy it more than Cambodia?
Because I would say that I rank Cambodia around 15th too, so it's kind of, yeah, but they both had their pros and cons. Like Cambodia had the fun strategy to watch, but it had next to no character moments. Mm-hmm. And then this had a lot of great character moments, even though I just said a lot of the cast was boring. So together they're like yin and yang and make a good idol, super idol. What about you?
I definitely prefer this over Cambodia. I find with any type of all-star seasons, I think I've said it in past episodes, fans versus favorite seasons are my least favorite thing in the history of Survivor. I don't like putting new players against old players. All-star seasons, I usually love them at the time, and then as soon as they're over, I'm like, okay, well, that was just sort of okay. that's kind of how I feel about Cambodia. I liked it a lot more when it finished, and since it's been done, I'm finding I probably am a lot more high on this season than that. So Cambodia may end up being, at least 5 spots lower on my list than this.
Well, let's bring up something I keep saying I'm going to bring up, and that will lead into Aubrey and Ty, which pretty much sums up, and the jury vote out, which we'll talk about. Yeah, the Survivor online fan base annoys me sometimes because I've seen people saying, and this is where I may disagree with you, Colin, or at least I want to bring up the discussion for debate, at least, if anything. People are saying, I've seen so many posts saying, the person who wins is the best player of the season. Let's stop debating this. Let's stop talking about this. And I just think this is like my time to vent when I see. I don't do a Ben who types out angry responses to people and posts them and gets in trouble. I just vent it on these shows. But what's the point of having a Facebook group or a forum or a Reddit thread or a podcast if you can't even discuss and debate things? Like, yes, Michelle won, but what's the point of having a discussion thread if we can't discuss things? This isn't Garrett Adelstein here. Like, yes, Michelle won the jury votes, but let's talk about it, and let's talk about why Aubrey lost and why Aubrey could have won, rather than just saying, oh, she's the best player because she won. That's like, we put Natalie White lower than Russell Hantz in our rankings. Probably a mistake.
We didn't
reflection.
All. We'll just say that.
Not everyone did. I did. Probably a mistake on reflection. But, like, let's not just champion these winners without having a discussion about it. Yes, their name is on the list of winners, but we need to at least talk about their game and what was good and what was bad. And to me, it's not a fact. People act like it's a fact. I disagree that it's a fact that the best player to win, the best player is the winner because they completed the objective, which is to get the jury votes at the end. To me, that's an opinion, and some would argue that it's a fact. I disagree. I don't think it's a fact. And I'm thinking of examples of like an AFL game or a ice hockey game. If you have someone who's really good throughout the whole season and the objective is to get to the final and win the final, that person is really good, or that team, they win so many games, they get to the final and they lose. Is the team that won the final automatically just the best team of the season, no matter what, because they won the finale? And people say, oh, well, that's different, but people call Survivor a game all the time, so I don't think we can say that's different. And a lot of people would say that team that won all the games but then lost at the finale, they crumbled. People would still say overall, not necessarily they played their best final game, aka the best final tribal council, but overall they would say that team, even though they didn't win, was still the best of the season. So I don't think it's a fact, and it annoys me because I like to have debate and discussion, and I think that is my biggest pet peeve of the entire Survivor fan base, and not just with Michelle. It's been happening for years. Is no, stop talking about that because they won the jury votes, they completed the objective, they're the best, blah 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 blah. It annoys me, and I'm not saying that Aubrey is better than Michelle. I'm just saying that annoys me, and we should discuss it. And we should be bringing factors up, like the ice hockey in the AFL, and what they did throughout the game. Speak, Colin, because I'm about to destroy my computer and wake your baby up.
Well, there's 2 things I want to touch on before I even give my opinion. First, 5 seasons later, you're still ranting about Garrett Adelstein.
Yeah, someone's going to bring this up to Garrett again.
Yeah. I was hoping we'd get Garrett on this season, but it's not happening now.
I wasn't. People just embarrass me in front of him.
Secondly, you're yelling so much you sound like a Michelle confessional. What's wrong with you?
Yes. How ironic.
All right, so now my opinion. It's so hard to judge because there are scenarios that completely go against, oh, well, if you win, you're automatically the best player. And I'm not going to think of every single season right now, but let's just throw a scenario out there of, let me pick a random season here. Let's take a look at Fiji. Earl, maybe the most dominant win of all time. Earl sitting next to two players in the end who nobody was going to lose to. They were the perfect goats to have at the end. Now, let's just fantasize and say that Earl was medevaced before the final three. And let's say this was a final
scenario is hurting my heart as the leader of the Earl fan club.
Well, let's imagine that Earl's medevaced. Let's imagine that Yao Man is still voted out fourth. This is a final two season instead of a final three. Earl's medevaced because his prostate's bothering him and he ate too much beef. And your final two is Dreams against Cassandra. Take your pick, whoever wins that. The best player did not win this season. There was a scenario where
Yao Man... That's a great pick.
Yeah, and Yao Man, you could still make the argument that even though, Yao Man was played, does that mean if Yao Man lost this game to Dreams, that Dreams was the best player? Sometimes you're sitting next to the best people. If you're going to make the argument that the best person won, well, then the person who got the second most amount of votes in Tribal Council is automatically the second best player. And the person who finished third but didn't get any votes in the Tribal Council is still the best player because they were able to vote out the fourth place person. There's a reason why...
That's where the hypocrites come in, because they don't then say Russell Hantz is the second best player of Samoa. They say he's the worst player. Yeah, and you can't say that if you're going to say that the person who wins at the end, because they got to the end, is the best, because the person who got the second closest is the second best. It doesn't hold up.
And there's a reason why. I'm so glad that you're on headphones right now, because otherwise my baby would be screaming and
I
pooping.
forget that you have a baby. You could have two people screaming in your head.
That's right. I didn't think that we would have two crying fits 2 weeks in a row, but Noah's almost brought us there.
I'll be pooping.
But there's also a reason why the last position before the final Tribal Council has become known as where the best player gets voted out before you get there. That's why you have players like Lex and Kathy and Helen that just don't make the finals because you take out the best player because you know that person is going to win. There's luck in everything. There's luck in winning the Tribal Council votes. You could make the argument, and I'm going to go on a bit of a rant here myself, but you can make the argument and say, when you have a jury of only 7 people, you've taken one person out of the jury in a twist that no other survivors have been able to do, that nobody had any control over, and you now have a jury of only 7 people with 3 people to vote for. Well, what if this had come down to a vote where one person gets 3 votes, and 2 votes went to Aubrey and 2 votes went to Ty? Well, now the winner didn't even get the majority of the jury. That's a flaw in this season that they need to consider going forward, even with that twist. Because, yes, Michelle won 5-2 in this, but that doesn't mean that's the way it was always going to go. What if she hadn't taken out Neil? What if she performed a little bit worse on one of these questions? What if Aubrey actually showed a little bit of emotion in this Tribal Council and won over a few people? You could have had Michelle as the winner with 3 votes, Ty with 2, Aubrey with 2, and Michelle didn't even win the majority of the jury. You can't necessarily say... I think in most cases the winner is the best because they found a way to get to the end, but that doesn't automatically make you the best player. And I'm not even saying Aubrey's the best player. I think Sydney's the best player. I also don't like the idea of it coming down to just let's make fire at a Final Four. Like, there should be some other way to decide this that has to do with the game itself, because nobody's ever going to come out there and say, why should you win Survivor? Well, I was able to make fire in one challenge because we couldn't come to a decision.
Yeah, I make no apologies for yelling. But what we just did was what... I honestly don't care if I've lost 100 fans or whatever throughout the season. I'm just speaking my mind now because I'm sick of this. Like, this is supposed to be about having fun and discussing a show. And I
fans are stripping all the fun out of this.
They're ruining my fun. All right.
Let the critical podcasters have their fun.
But we had a discussion and we brought up dreams and we brought up Cassandra and the different factors that go into it. And I just hate this staunch thing of let's not talk about it. Let's just automatically say. And I really don't think it is a fact that the best player is the winner because they completed the objective. Because again, Russell Hantz is called the worst player of all time, all the time, and you cannot say that. Or I'm going to write #hypocrite in all capitals. Then people will listen to something I said on my 18 episodes ago that contradicts something I'm saying now, and they'll make a fool of me. But anyway, one comment I liked in terms of that debate that I keep bringing up, which just boils my... Just thinking about people who say, let's not discuss it. I'm sorry. But someone said that Michelle is a worthy winner, but she was not the best player of the season. And I'm not saying I agree with that, although I kind of agree with it. I'm just saying... Well, actually, I do agree with it completely. And I'm not sure who said that. I read it somewhere, and I'm sorry I'm not giving credit to that person.
Let's just say it was
that's
Ben.
A good... Yeah, Ben said... No, he wouldn't be that rational. I think that's a good way of looking at it, though. Like, the winner can be good and be the worthy, deserving winner without being the best player. And then my next question, you've already said it, is who was the best player of the season?
Yeah, Sydney for me.
Yeah, I'm inclined to probably agree with you. Because we'll get to Aubrey and Ty, like I keep saying. But, yeah, I probably agree. All round, I think she made great connections. She had the strategy, she had the physical, she had the social. Her big move kind of lost her 2 to 3 votes, which was a shame when that should have been her big thing that gained her votes. Again, we're not getting into bitter jury again.
Let's also make the argument, as I've said already, Michelle's biggest ally in the game cost her a vote.
Yeah. Well, and the fact that the other thing going in... Michelle winning immunity was the only thing that stopped Sydney getting to the final tribal council. Every other factor, Aubrey, she had to have Ty stay with her. Michelle, she had to win immunity. But Sydney she was allied with Michelle and she was allied with Aubrey. She was going to the final tribal council provided Michelle didn't win. So again, the luck factor almost comes into the one thing that couldn't happen to Sydney happened. So yeah, I would probably say Sydney, but I'd have to maybe analyse it a bit more.
Or because you're agreeing with me, let's just say no more analysing. It's a fact.
Yeah, it's a fact. Let's stop debating it. It's just a fact because she had all these factors. Let's quickly touch on this, just to delay Aubrey and Ty anymore, because this is literally my last other point besides Aubrey and Ty and then the reunion and stuff. So we'll just briefly, we've kind of brought it up. The jury vote out twist, thoughts? I've written here in my notes, did it change the winner? ? Probably not, but maybe it could.
It made for good television. This is where they have to be really careful using this in the future. And I like that Prope said, we've been debating using this. How long did he say? 7 years?
7 years.
Arguably, this has been on the table since Fiji or China. And they just never made a move on it. There are a lot of seasons where this could have gone terribly wrong. If this advantage is the deciding factor in somebody winning the game, then it's not good. And I'll give you a perfect example. And if we go back to the rankings again, I was a big defender of Clay. But if this twist existed in Thailand and Clay had the ability to cancel out one jury vote, Clay could potentially have ended up the winner of Thailand. He was 1 vote away from winning, to beating Brian. Nobody's going to say Clay was the best player, and that would have ruined an otherwise great season. The idea that Neil would convince a lot of people on the jury, I don't think that's the case. I still stand by the fact
that was a false narrative.
Yeah, well, they needed some type of story to tell. And this is where I've been saying that it's not that Michelle's a bad winner. She may very well have been the best player out there. It's like Danny Boatwright. We don't know because she wasn't playing obvious to the cameras. And if that was her strategy, then, hey, that's great. But it doesn't change the fact that as a viewer, we can only go based off of what we saw.
Well, she made the right move here, at least.
Yeah, I mean, she canceled out a vote that was... But the funny thing is, at the time, I was saying, I don't know why she would bother to cancel out Neil's vote, because there was at least a question that Neil may not have voted for Aubrey. He didn't give her the idol. We found out there's a good reason why he didn't give her the idol. Neil wasn't necessarily always going to vote for Aubrey. Joe was. So was it the best move? I don't know. But overall...
it's better than the false thing of Scott, which I was going to cringe so hard if she got rid of Scott.
But again, I give credit. This has to work in the right season. If you did this in All-Stars, you have an even more bitter jury, and it makes it a more miserable season. Doing it here, where even a person like Scott or Jason, thinking they could be voted out, they're laughing. They're like, this is fantastic. Neil, a guy who had no say on anything this entire season, he loved this one moment. I think that the cast made the best of this. And the fact that it didn't necessarily decide the game made it for good television. But I would be really cautious if I were anybody involved in the show in using it going forward.
Yeah, it was fun. Don't need to see it again.
And let's just say, do not do, like, the biggest mistake, do not do this on a season where a person could end up winning without holding the majority of the votes. Like, that's a huge mistake. You can't, if you're going to do this, do it where there's 9 people on the jury, not with a 7. You're going to end up with a 7-person jury and 3 people in the finals.
I've seen a lot of criticism for Neil's comments to Michelle. I thought it was funny. people
and Michelle didn't take it
personally.
This is the same thing we went through with the whole Alicia thing. If Michelle is not offended by it, if Michelle can hold her own against him, he has a right to say whatever he wants. If anybody out there had a right to say whatever they wanted, it's Neil. The guy got no airtime. He didn't get to go to Tribal. He went out with an idol in his pocket. He's got funny pants. Come on, let him have his moment.
Yeah. Probably just for the viewer's point, though, that the first jury member out who didn't really see much of the game, probably the best. Because at least the other jury members got to see more of what was going on and not through hearsay. Let's move on then. If they did that twist again, I wouldn't mind, but I'm not dying for it. I'd rather full rites of passage over that and a reward challenge, but that's just my personal opinion. I don't really have too much to add on Ty. I think we've kind of touched on it this episode and previous episodes. All I want to say is I don't think Ty had as big as a fan base as the producers, at least amongst the online people. Maybe it's different amongst the, quote, casuals. That's another debate I'm not getting into. But I don't think he had as big as a fan base and became the beloved character that they thought he would. But in the end, when I look back, I think Ty was a really solid and unique Survivor character who was fun. I was rooting for him to win as the lesser of 3 evils at the end. But I thought he was a good character in the end. He was frustrating at times and not as beloved as everyone thought he would be. But I'm just going to say I like Ty.
I love Ty. I think that he's... In this era of Survivor, I think it's a fair statement. Because if you're just looking at, well, who's the most popular character, you have people out there like Malcolm that have massive fan bases, but they fit a mold. When you're looking at characters like Ty, I think it's a fair statement only in that he's the character that breaks the mold. You don't have anybody else like him. He's like a Rupert. He's like a Yowman. I don't know of many other players like that we've had. When was the last time we had a character who was just completely unlike anybody we had seen before? Keith's a good example.
He was kind of big Tom, I guess.
But, well, even still, though, Keith, he was a funny character, but I don't know if he's the type of guy who was ever going to dominate all the screen time on a season. And I know
he was robbed of his Sia money.
Yeah, that's right.
We'll get to that.
Where was she when Keith wanted his whatever farmer money is
Toto license.
Toto, yeah, his chicken nuggets. But yeah, like it's been a long time since we've had a character that really broke the mold where you could
Abby
say,
Maria.
Yeah, well, not for the positives though. I don't know. But I mean,
we're talking about beloved character.
Yeah, beloved. I do agree. I don't think that he goes down as being as popular as Probst was saying. I do think he goes down as being that one-of-a-kind character that you're never going to see again. and he'll probably come back, 3-4 times throughout the course of this show before it's canceled. But even if you're comparing him to the most recent seasons, I don't know if you could say he's as popular as somebody like Malcolm was, or Keith. Sure, let's say it, Keith. He probably was more popular than Keith, but yeah, I mean, he's a one-of-a-kind character, and we're not going to see somebody like him again until he comes back next season and the one after that, and he pulls a Rupert or a Russell Hansen, just becomes overexposed.
I do think he would learn partly from his mistakes, so maybe.
But can he ever learn from the mistake of not being able to talk? I don't like that some people make this an accent thing. It has nothing to do with his accent. He is bad at defending his game. He's really good in a one-on-one situation. You put him in front of a group of people, he falls apart. This is a nervous thing. That's what it is. And he's terrible in front of a jury.
He just needs to learn more proverbs, I think, and become a new coach. All right. Aubrey, yeah, I don't know. I have not been shy of saying I'm not an Aubrey fan, which is funny because I was kind of knocking Michelle. And a lot of the Michelle hate comes from the really vocal Aubrey fans who think she's the greatest thing ever. And I wasn't one of those, but I still... And I made that tweet about, what did I say? Unapologetically say that this is the one season the jury got it wrong. I don't know if I agree with my statement now. And the big flaw, well, not the big flaw, but the big difference between Survivor players and Survivor fans is we get to see everything. And by everything, I mean a condensed 42-minute, 13-episode season. But Scott and Jason and Nick, they don't see, and Julia and Debbie and not Neil, don't see all the stuff that's going on behind the scenes. So we can easily say, because we're seeing what Aubrey is doing, that she is the better player. And I probably would say that she might be the better player, but I also think she has a ton of flaws. Like, she was very cold towards people.
She was indecisive all the time.
Indecisive. Her neuroses that Joe brought up.
Her biggest ally didn't vote with her half the time.
Yeah. Yeah, she just turned on her allies all the time, it seemed like. And she, like, that happened with Joe, it happened with Ty. And if she had voted with Ty that time, Michelle would not be the winner. Well, if she could get Sydney on her side as well, or Joe, sorry. Michelle would not be the winner, and Aubrey probably wins if she goes with Joe and Ty to the end. Yeah. So you could probably look at that as her losing moment right then and there, when she didn't vote with her ally Ty to get Michelle out, when Ty identified Michelle as someone who could win. So I do, but one thing I do disagree. I think it was Scott who said it. I haven't gone back and watched it yet. I will just say, it was a fun tribal council though, one of the better ones in recent years. But I disagree with Scott who said, Aubrey and Ty, your games got worse as it went along. Michelle, yours got better. Aubrey had a horrible first game. Aubrey is one of those players who really learnt towards the end and played a stronger game towards the end after. Like, she was making all sorts of blunders. The Julia thing, voting out Debbie, I was critical of.
Wasn't Scott the one who said, when I get a chance, I'm going to write down Aubrey, cross it off, put this, cross it off. Like,
yeah.
He was there for that vote, which was her worst moment of the game.
I'm so upset that no one wrote Aubrey's name, crossed it off, and wrote Michelle.
Yeah. Why couldn't he have done that in the final tribal council?
That would have been amazing. But yeah, I think she did grow as a player, and if she played again, which again, I'm not a huge Aubrey fan, even though much bigger Aubrey fan than Michelle fan, and I can appreciate Aubrey as a character looking back, even though I'm not a huge fan. If she did play again, I think she's a player who marginally learns from her mistakes. Like we talked about Ty, and that was kind of, maybe he will, maybe he won't. I think there's no way Aubrey doesn't learn from this season and plays a much stronger game, even if she doesn't make the finals. Which again, like if she made the finals one season and played a shady game, but became the fourth jury member in her next season, played a stronger game, but it comes back to the whole winner debate thing. I don't know. I'm just rambling here. Aubrey, not a unique character, but a good character in the end. Not one I was huge on. I don't think we should maybe get that outraged, even though I don't think Michelle played an overly great winner's game. But I think if she won, I could see it, and I think the winners did the editors did a better job at telling Aubrey's story towards the end, which made me think she was the winner.
Well, I've been saying with Michelle that I believe the issue is that there just was nothing there for them to develop with her because she wasn't going to be playing to the cameras and everything. I could say the same for Aubrey, in all honesty. I actually don't like that there were all these comparisons made to Cochran with Aubrey, that Aubrey herself compared herself to Cochran, because the biggest difference is Cochran played to the cameras. Not just played his game openly to the cameras, but he played a character to the cameras. And Aubrey didn't do that. That was actually one of the things that disappointed me with her early in the season, is that it felt like she should have been a much more fun character. And I feel like if she had presented herself on the show the way she presented herself in casting, the way she presented herself in pregame, that she would have not only been a much bigger character than we even saw, that she probably could have won this game, because she has a lot of personality and she is very likable. She just wouldn't do that on this show. And maybe it was, that she was sick or she was tired or beaten down by the game, whatever, but she wouldn't go there. And I think one thing that the biggest Aubrey fans out there are missing when they're talking about how great Aubrey is that Aubrey is kind of the first ever social media star of Survivor, which feels weird this far into the social media age of Survivor. But she's become popular based so much of her tweets and what she does outside of the show and how she's responded to people outside of the show.
Wasn't that the entire Dirty 30?
Yeah, well, negatively more than, but like, if we're looking at it, I talked about how Probst even felt the need, he had to explain a little bit more Michelle's game because it just wasn't there. Probst felt the need to explain Aubrey's appeal by mentioning stuff she was doing on Twitter and Instagram and everything. That's where a lot of the fans are coming from Aubrey, and I think most of the people we've heard from have said the same thing. So, I love the way that she says this. They're not always talking about the show. I think if you were to remove social media, if there was a ban the way there used to be, and I wish they would go back to that. I wish that we weren't living in this new era where everybody was tweeting live on every episode. If you go back to a couple of years ago and she can't say anything, I don't think Aubrey's as big of a star as she is now. And I'm not saying that as a negative thing on Aubrey. I actually avoid, for the most part, this season, anything that the survivors are saying about the season. I even avoided the pregame stuff, and I really liked Aubrey by the end. I think that she's a good enough character to stand on her own, but the fact that she's as popular as she is has a lot to do with stuff that's outside of the show, and I don't think you can compare her the same way as you could compare somebody who didn't necessarily take advantage of that.
I actually glad this Aubrey losing to Michelle thing happened, because I think it's created a unique thing over the past week in the Survivor fan base. It hasn't happened in a long time. And there's been a lot of snarky people and a lot of annoying people. And I'm probably one of the annoying people, but a lot of people.
A lot of yelling.
A lot of yelling, a lot of pooping, and a lot of crying. But I think it has sparked some interesting debate and some uniqueness. And it's funny seeing someone with a, quote, winner's edit, even though we did question it a lot in the early days on this show, but then towards the end we were pretty much on the bandwagon of Aubrey winning. That such a big character lost at the end, and that they told the runners-up story, a la Russell Hands, and they didn't tell the winner's story as well. Which maybe you could put Spencer in that reign as well, but I also do think they did a good job with Jeremy. So, yeah. So, just to wrap that up before we get into the final two talking points, the reunion and next season, is Aubrey a better player than Michelle, or is Aubrey a good player?
This is that season where it's too hard to tell, because they did something different with how they showed us the characters. I think that there are enough negatives about Aubrey that I would argue that as a fan, I would have voted for Aubrey, but again, this is where you can't say this person is automatically the best winner. If we're going to go back to that again, because no jury is, well, very few juries are 100% decided. And for anybody to say, well, Michelle is automatically the best player, like you were saying, it's a fact, then you're saying, well, then the two people on the jury who didn't vote for her got it wrong. Well, if you're going to argue that the jury system determines who's the best player, then you have to take into account that there are people who don't agree with that on the jury. That doesn't make them wrong. It's just, well, you played differently for some people. For me, I think as a fan, if I were a juror, I would prefer Aubrey as a winner, and I would vote for Aubrey. Because I wouldn't care as much about the social part. I'd look at, well, who had the most control in the game and who made the best moves. Having said that, if I'm ranking runners-up, Aubrey's pretty low on my list for runners-up. I love her as a character, but they showed...
There's been some bad runners-up, Colin.
Yeah, well, I'm not saying she's the worst runner-up.
Dreams and Cassandra.
Yeah, she's higher than Dreams and Cassandra, but she's not...
Will.
She didn't have a game... If she won this season, as I've been saying for weeks, I have just as many arguments for why she shouldn't win as anybody else. And that's part of why I love this season, because it is different. So it's not a negative thing. It's just, it's a fact.
But yeah, I think Aubrey in the end was a decent player, but it's funny that this big outrage, a lot of it has come from, to me the outrage is they told Aubrey's story over Michelle, but a lot of it has come from Aubrey was this genius player that needed to win.
Yeah.
Which, yeah.
Who made a lot of bad moves. That does not make a genius.
Yeah. Although it was a more fun game, and I tweeted that the jury got it wrong. Again, I don't necessarily agree with my comment, but as a fan watching, if the fans had to vote, a la wanting Russell Hantz's rules, I would have voted for Aubrey out of those three. But that's from watching a fan's perspective and not being there.
Although having said that, you brought up a good point that in some ways we see more than the jury does.
Yeah, which I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but it's just why, like, I've seen also, I need to stop getting angry at fans, but I've seen, I'm not going to talk about this because I wasn't there, was one comment. Why are you on an online discussion thread on Survivor then, if you're not going to talk about it because you weren't there?
Why even bother watching the show if that's the case?
Yeah, you can watch it, but like, why are you on a thing discussing it? Like, how dare you get angry at Will Sims for saying that about Shireen when you weren't there? How dare you? Like, it's ridiculous. I'm sorry. This is probably the people are going to boycott Survivor Oz. Well, more people are going to boycott after hearing me just rant and get angry at people. But I'm just over it. Some people are silly. Let's move on. I'm going to try not to yell some more here, but let's talk about the reunion. And I really don't have anything to add other than I am just sick and tired of celebrities thinking they can do whatever they want, whenever they want. I still don't even really know who the fuck Sia is, mind my language, but it needed to be said. And I don't care about Sia, and I don't know if it was staged or not. If it was staged, shame on them. If it wasn't staged, you just imagine if a random person in a dumbass wig tried to get on stage to give time money, like not a celebrity. Security would be there in a second, getting them off stage from live TV. Celebrities thinking they can do whatever they want, ruining my favourite show when I wanted to hear Sydney talk about her best game of the season. I'm looking at my tweets still here, and this is live from the show. This is so cringeworthy. #Survivor. And I said, what's one way to top the ultimate shit fest of Braces Girl and Cara Moen? Sia and Drew Carey. It was just... Like, I get the Drew Carey thing because of the Price is Right thing coming up. Yeah. But it was just like, here's Sia wasting all this time, and let's move now to Drew Carey. It's like, give me a break!
Well, I do have to say...
Let me talk to Dr. Joe afterwards. It's like, oh.
It was nice to hear Probst come out and say, yeah, I probably shouldn't have thrown to Drew Carey right after that. It's like, I apologize. That was bad timing. I just also want to complain... Why is it that John Cochran gets more time in every single reunion than Sydney gets in her own when Probst was talking her up? Sydney could have won this game. Here's her mom. Let's find out what her mom thought. Okay, Mom, how do you feel about the fact that Sydney doesn't get to even have a close-up in her own reunion show? I understand they don't have a lot of time, and to some extent you need to have these celebrity things. That's what's going to make it onto YouTube and go viral. Oh, look at who showed up at the Survivor reunion. But let's look at this episode. Only had one person voted out before the final tribal council. It had all these reward challenges, and I was looking at my counter, and it was 15 minutes in to the reunion show by the time the reunion show started. The episodes are running too long. If you can keep a regular episode of Survivor down to 60 minutes or 42
we don't need
minutes,
a reward challenge.
Exactly. The issue isn't, oh, well, we're not spending our time right. The issue is you're taking too long to get to the reunion part of the show. It used to be the votes are read in the first 5 minutes of the reunion show and then jump into the reunion show. Just cut down the bloated finales and then do whatever you want. Bring out Drew Carey, bring out whoever any random celebrity. Bring out Justin Bieber on there. Maybe not Justin. Bring out anybody but Justin Bieber.
Well, that would probably be more entertaining, him getting up and wanting to give Ty money.
Yeah, and if you're going to bring out Drew Carey, bring out Ryan Stiles, Colin Mockery, and Wayne Brady, and have them do like a hoedown or something like that.
Sketch.
Yeah, but like, let's just start talking to people, and it's not hard to do. Brian Gumble used to find 10
bring
seconds.
Bring back Brian Gumble!
Yeah, let's bring back Gumble here. It does not take much. So, Jenny, how are you doing? Standing on any chairs lately? No. All right, thanks for coming.
Yes,
what?
Exactly.
There's
and
so
it's not
many
even...
people. Just one question. All we want to do is just know that these people are alive. We were left with this season believing that most of these people died once that they left Ponderosa. And now we don't even get to see them in a close-up.
Yeah, it's not even just Sydney. It's like, I want to hear about Alicia's thoughts on the fight.
Yeah.
Between Scott that Probst made such a big deal with. I want to know about Jenny's ear and how it's doing, and Darnell taking a poop in the water. Like, it's just, and I want to know more about the winner. At least show us the winner. So it's just, was it staged, the Sia thing?
I don't believe it was from Probst's side. I have heard that crew members knew about this. They just didn't want to tell Probst. Because otherwise I don't see him ever apologizing for bad transitions and saying, oh, I probably shouldn't have thrown a Drew Carey right away. I probably should have gone to commercial first. He probably didn't know, but the thing was, there's no way anybody shows up. That could have been anybody. Like, that could have been Justin Bieber in a Sia wig. We don't know that. Security was
probably
never
wasn't even her.
Yeah, exactly. It could have been like, I don't know, Mark the Chicken in a Sia wig. We don't know what it was. But there's no way that they let that happen and they let this show go on like that without the crew at least knowing. And Probst would have ignored anybody else yelling in the crowd. He did seem caught off guard, but guaranteed he was looking at a producer who was going like, roll with it, you know?
Yeah, he was a bit rattled, Jeff. I didn't know what to do. I was going to Drew, but then that was an amazing moment, and now we're going to commercial break. He's not the best with the whole live show thing. Hashtag bring back Brian.
Yeah, bring back Gumble.
Can we get that trending? Hashtag bring back Gumble.
Please, anybody listen to this episode, you've had us talk about apple recipes and tuna and crying babies. You heard a baby fart and poop on the air last week. We're asking only one thing from you.
Yeah, one
keep
thing
Survivor
of you.
Oz alive. Bring back Gumble.
Hashtag bring back Gumble. I'm tweeting it right as we wrap this up. I miss Brian Gumble.
Yeah.
And hashtag screw you, Rosie. This isn't a debate for now, but it would be interesting. Maybe this will be a discussion on the off season if we do also show discussions. Who knows what's happening? But is Jeff the best person for reunion shows? We won't get into it, but hashtag bring back Gumble.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have nothing else to add on the reunion show. I hate it when celebrities think they can do whatever they want, and I don't even know Sia, and I don't care for Sia.
I would love to add something else on the reunion show, but we just talked about the only two things that happened.
There's nothing else. Yeah. it's not as bad as Caramel, but it's damn near there.
Yeah.
This is my final tweet before I wrapped up, pretty much. I've put in hashtag quotes like expression. See ya, wouldn't want to be Jan Gentry, Survivor Thailand, which sums it up pretty much from my perspective. I hated that with a passion, and I don't care if you call me a spoil sport. That was one of the worst moments in Survivor history. And I don't want to spoil it because I'm very busy at the moment, but I'm actually planning a top 10 called Survivor Oz Top 10 Cringeworthy Reunion Moments. And that will definitely be up there. I've actually come up with the list, but I just don't know when I have the time to write it, but maybe stay tuned for that. Moving on, last thing to talk about, we've covered a hell of a lot. They're actually calling a season Millennials versus Gen X. That's an actual thing that's happening next season.
I'm not going to complain about the twist because I think with every season now, people are so quick to complain, oh, I'm tired of these twists. They don't realize the twists have been going on forever. Just because they didn't call Survivor Amazon men versus women, doesn't mean it's no different than Survivor Gen X versus Millennials or Brains versus Brawn versus Beauty. It's the fact
just Nicaragua too.
Exactly. They're just including it in the name now. People were okay with it when it wasn't called that, but I'm kind of on board with that. I don't know why this had to be called Gen X versus Millennials or Millennials versus Gen X.
It's the name that kills me. It's the worst name ever.
Yeah, like Fiji or wherever. Let me look. I thought I had the name here, like Mama Kaluka or whatever it is, where they're filming the next season. Fiji season. It's like, call it Survivor Mama Kaluka Millennials versus Gen X.
Millennials, yes.
Yeah.
I had to ask when it was like, did I miss something, or was that the actual name, or was there an actual name that he didn't read out?
But I am confused about something with this. Wasn't there another generation between Generation X and Millennials called Generation Y? Are they leaving out like an entire generation of people here?
I'm confused about the generation thing. Like, I don't get who fits into what, and what's a millennial, and what's this, and what's that. Yeah. I've heard Generation I as a thing as well. I've heard Generation Z as a thing.
Generation Sia? Please no.
Sia. Generation Gumball.
That's what we need to know. Which generation does Brian Gumbel side with in this season?
That will tell us everything. No, but I was thinking that I am a bit over 3 tribe seasons. Give it a break. Give it like 2 or 3 seasons, then bring it back. I'm a bit over it. But you'd think it would be like a baby boomers versus Gen X versus millennials type thing. And call it Survivor Generations or something like that. Like, if you're not going to put Mama Luca, then call it Survivor Generations. That's what they should have called it, Survivor Generations.
My brother said the exact same thing to me the other day. It's like, why didn't they call it Survivor Generations? And that would be a little bit more appropriate.
Yeah, it's still pretty dumb, but it's better than the worst name in Survivor history, Millennials versus Gen X.
And I don't like it.
Really rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?
I don't mind the twist. I think the twist is a good idea. I like it better than just old versus young, because where's your cutoff? Or old men versus old women versus young women. Ultimately, these twists never end up being the entire season. I think that's where the issue of just making that the official title is. Because you can say, Survivor Brains versus Brawn versus Beauty, but ultimately, Survivor Cagayan was not all about Brains versus Brawn versus Beauty. So if these tribes end up being switched, the title no longer makes any sense, because these people may not even end up working together the whole time. It's and plus, I mean, the idea of millennials versus Gen X, it's the dumbest thing since they made up a word called no caller. I mean, let's just go with generations. You don't have to identify what it is.
Yeah. It's just, the name kills it for me. And I know once the season kicks off, if it's a good season, that's going to... But welcome to Survivor Oz. We're talking about Survivor episode 4 of Millennials versus Gen X.
I'm saying this right now. If Ben's not back and I'm still doing the recaps, there is no way I'm starting every episode with, here's our episode 8 recap of Survivor Millennials versus Gen X.
Just call it Generations.
Yeah, Survivor Generations or Survivor Mama Kaluka, whatever.
Yeah, where was Millennials versus Gen X versus no generation?
Yeah.
Well, we don't identify with our generation.
Exactly.
And why? Like, it's Generation X. Gen X just gives it this horrible, like, the age of Twitter of shortening things and just.
And how come the millennials, the ones using Twitter, aren't shortening millennials?
Yeah, why aren't they the Mills or something?
Yeah,
Mills versus
Gen X versus Mills.
Gen X versus MILFs. I would watch that. Now that's a better season.
There we go. We're coming up with. We're going to be hired by CBS to pitch the next season here.
Gen X versus MILFs versus no color.
MILFs versus GILFs versus non-MILFs versus non-GILFs.
MILFs versus GILFs versus no color. It's going to be the season 34.
Let's get that trending along with Bring Back Gumball. Survivor, MILFs versus GILFs.
MILFs versus GILFs. Yeah, we've had enough of 3 tribes. Get rid of the no color. We just Survivor MILFs versus GILFs. That would be a better title. That's what I'm going to be calling next season.
Yeah, that's going to be my next article. The top 10 potential castings for Survivor MILFs versus
Fantasy cast for MILFs versus GILFs. Brenda, Kim,
Holly Hoffman.
I'm just casting it now. There you go. Along with Bring Back Gumball, get in your fantasy cast for
Survivor
MILFs versus GILFs.
Let us know your thoughts on who should make Survivor MILFs versus GILFs.
MVG. Ben goes away for a few weeks with an article on the site for a fantasy cast for MILFs versus GILFs.
Ben doesn't even read our site. He's never going to notice.
Yeah, well, that probably is a Ben article.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that sounds like a better title. Yeah, I was just quickly to wrap up on that. I will say I'm happy to see 2 tribes back of no twisty people. Like we've had 2 tribes, but it was blood versus water or all returning players, fans versus favourites. So I'm happy to see that back. Probably could have been 16 over 20 or 18 even with 5-4, 5-4 in terms of the genders. 5 MILFs, 5 GILFs, 5 GILFs, 5 MILFs on each tribe. But that's what I'm liking. And the preview looked fun. There was a lot of forced, I'm a Generation X. But it looked like it was going to be a fun season, I thought.
And we're seeing characters this early on with several months to go. We already have an idea of what type of people are making the cast.
Yeah, and I thought everyone they did highlight, it looked like they were going to be good players or good characters. So I wouldn't be too worried about the twist. And for all we know, they'll do the 3 tribe at 18 thing again. Highly likely, I think. Or maybe not, because we won't know the people. Who knows?
And then it'll no longer be Millennials versus Gen X.
Yeah. Well, that's we've covered it, but that's the flaw with the title. When they switch at 16, it's just like heroes versus villains. They never switched, and if this maybe this will be the first season in a long time to not have a switch. Probably not. Anyway, I don't think we can top MILFs versus GILFs. I wanted this to be an hour long because I'm tired and I need to work early, but I think we covered a lot of discussion, a lot that's been building up over the past few days for me. I'm sorry for yelling at some points, waking the baby up. But I think we've touched on a lot. I think we were fair to Michelle while also criticising her. I think we were fair to Aubrey, also criticising. I think we were fair to the jury, also criticising. And I think we were very fair in saying that some people in the Survivor fan base are dumbasses. Well, I said that. Colin didn't say that. Get angry at me, don't get angry at him. He's got babies to take care of. He doesn't need your hate. But I think that we went out with a bang. I thought this was a good final one. It's been a while since we've done an actual Oztopsy, and it's been a while since Ben's been on the episode. But yeah, I thought this was a good one, and we covered the main talking points and had a lot of discussion.
It's a good way to end out the season. We ended the way we started. We criticized the fans.
Yeah. It has come full circle in a way. So yeah, bittersweet that it's over. Freeing up a bit of time now that it's over, but it was a fun season and it was fun to talk about it.
And
so
fun to not
it.
have Ben for a while too.
Yeah, it was a good break, I think. But hashtag bring back Ben. Hashtag bring back Gumball. I miss Gumball. What's he up to nowadays? Anyway, subscribe, do all the things that we tell you to do that if you're listening to this, you've probably already done. And yeah, if I was clever, I would come up with an intro for MILF vs. GILF, but I can't. 16 people! 8 women known for having children and being incredibly attractive versus 8 fathers. Survivor.
Milf.
16 MILFs. 39 days. 8 MILFs. 8 GILFs. I'm Survivor. We'll speak to you next time on the trains. Good time.